What is up, everyone? I am Nick, and we have our first ever episode of Martini's Cantina here, joined with the Mr. Anthony Forrest. How are you doing today, Anthony?
I'm really good. I'm good, thanks, Nick. Yeah, thanks for inviting me on your show as the number one
I know you
first.
got the test run.
Yeah, yeah. We're doing the rookie run. Yeah,
Ah, we'll have a good time. We'll keep it
yeah.
short and sweet, but we'll have a good story for the viewers to go through. So, if you
Okay,
wouldn't mind just starting, just kind of giving yourself a little background, maybe how you got into acting, directing, all that kind of deal, and then talk about like some films that you're on, and we can kind of go from there, nitpick
sure.
some things.
Yeah. Um, so I started actually in high school. I think a lot of people kind of do that. I got interested in when the variety shows were being done.
Hmm.
So there's myself and a few friends, and we'd put together kind of like a an act that we're doing impersonations and things like that. So that's where it started. And then I kind of moved on from there to doing plays at the high school, and then doing plays. I was living, I grew up in Montreal,
Hmm.
so I was then started getting more interested, and I started going to acting classes downtown and doing some auditions and things like that and getting involved. And then I joined a theater company, which was a Shakespearean theater company, which was run by a man called Maxim Muzumdar. And he was extremely astute at the classics. He normally took all the lead roles himself. But for me as a young actor, it was a great opportunity to actually get on the stage and learn my Shakespeare and do my
Yeah.
homework. Yeah. So that's kind of where it started. And then it was in late 1973, 74. I'd saved some money up from doing TV commercials and things like that. And I decided I booked myself a flight to London because I thought I needed to expand a little bit. And so I took the opportunity and I thought I'm going to go to London because for me it was an easier choice as I was born in the UK, so I didn't have to worry. I could be able to get myself an English passport and I could be able to settle there for a while
Yeah.
on the back of that. Yeah, so that was how I made the leap. Yeah. And from that, well, it just kind of seemed to fall in place. I did a TV series called Anne of Avonlea, which was a follow-up to Anne of Green Gables for the BBC.
Okay.
And I started getting film roles. Actually, I did a lot of commercials when I was in London as well. I did nearly 12 commercials with the director Ridley Scott before he was a feature film director. And I also did a couple of commercials with Adrian Lyne, who directed Flashdance, and Nick Road, who did The Man Who Fell to Earth. I mean, at that time in London, there were a lot of advertising directors or commercials directors, and they were also doing some music videos, but mainly they were doing commercials because that was a more lucrative in London. They were becoming the up and coming directors of feature films, and they were all looking to branch out from doing commercials into doing larger projects. And so it was a great opportunity because many of those directors then went on to be, well, Ridley Scott, Adrian Lyne. These are directors that have really gone on to achieve something.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, so it was really an opportunity. And so, yeah, but it was, I guess I kind of, I just kind of stayed with it. Um, it's funny because acting was not my necessarily my career path. When I went to college, I studied music. And so
To be a performer or like in like an orchestral kind of deal.
the idea was in an orchestral environment, but I actually didn't have the chops and I didn't have the patience to do the 8 hours a day practicing.
That's fair. I played the viola for like an maybe like a year in fourth grade, and I was like, I'm done with that. It's so time
I
consuming. And
studied. I mean, I studied and I did do the work. I was studying two instruments at the same time. I was actually studying flute and oboe.
oh, okay.
And I was very lucky because I had a private flute teacher, and her name was Jean Backstresser. And she's from Ohio. and she had just graduated from Juilliard School of Music, and she got the first chair in the Montreal Symphony Orchestra.
Okay.
Today, she's one of the world's most renowned flautists. She's plays concerts all over the world herself and recorded numerous albums and that. But what she did for me, which was quite extraordinary, is she would said, "Would I like to come and see rehearsals in the Montreal Symphony?" So I would kind of cut classes. I would go and I would sit in this huge auditorium, and the orchestra is dressed in jeans and t-shirts, and nobody's wearing their formal attire, and they're rehearsing these great classical pieces. And so that really led me to want to become much more interested in orchestration, and not so much as an instrumentalist, but basically overall sound and the whole idea of composition and orchestration. And so I started drifting into that. Yeah. But lo and behold, I like many, I decided to when I had the opportunity, we had a lot of local bands where we were, and I was in bands with friends, and the band we got an opportunity to go on tour to Western Canada, and so I decided to drop out of college for a while and went on tour with a 10-piece band, which was not very lucrative. I can assure
Okay.
you. With 10 people in the band, you don't make a lot of money.
Yeah, a lot of splits. A lot of splits there. And then you got
Yeah.
all the agencies and all that good stuff. I don't know how deep you guys went, but I could see that being an
Yeah,
issue, especially at a college age.
yeah, we did some good gigs. We played the Edmonton Klondike Festival. We played throughout Alberta and into the edge of BC and then and into Saskatoon, well, Saskatoon and Saskatchewan. So we played the Western provinces basically for many months. But then we decided we can't keep going on being broke like this. So we all headed home. And it was when I got home that I decided I was going to pursue acting a little more, as music was not was not working out the way I thought it might.
That's
Yeah,
fair.
yeah.
So how do you so obviously Star Wars, you were in A New Hope. Um
Yep.
your first ever Star Wars, right? So how do you even it's kind of like that time period where sci-fi and all of that just wasn't it's not that it wasn't around. It just
Yeah.
wasn't as developed as obvious that it is now, and like the whole community for it. So I guess my question for that is, how do you get into Star Wars? Were you like comfortable with everything in terms of just like the overall like genre of it, or were you kind of just jumping into it? And I mean, George Lucas obviously at that time is kind of like one of those developing directors. So was it kind of one of those deals, or
Well, it was really the fact that um I'd done a few films in England, and uh I'd done one in Montreal, I think just prior to Star Wars, which was with where Martin Landau plays my father actually, which kind of nice.
yeah,
And then so my agent in the UK contacted me to go along for this interview. And I didn't really know anything about what, you don't necessarily get told what you're going in for all the time. I mean, you don't, at a certain level, that's for the guys who are right up in the A list. They get a lot of information.
yeah,
Whereas when you're not up there, you don't get a lot of information. You basically go in, which was nicer in those times, is the fact you actually got to meet real people as opposed to sending video clips in and doing video auditions.
yeah. So it was like a true audition. Like you went in front of like in terms of like judges or like they would have you read a
Yeah.
line and that kind of deal.
Everything in those days is you actually had sometimes three people sitting there and you were actually performing live. You
Hmm.
know, they would tape it, but you actually had an audience.
Yeah,
So you actually had a crew in a way, or an audience that you were actually performing to. Whereas videotaping at home and doing it on your iPhone and stuff like that, that's very impersonal. And it's kind of like, and I'm sure there are people who do like probably hundreds of takes trying
yeah,
to figure out the rest one, which I don't know if that helps a director or a producer, because there's not a lot of opportunity to actually get a feel for the person and what they might potentially do. Whereas in a live interview, you can actually go and you can get the person to give you five different readings of something.
yeah.
You can give the actor and say, try it. Can you try it another way? Can you? And so you start to see scope and you start to see difference. Whereas just sending in a videotape, ooh, I don't know how helpful that is in the long run.
And I was
Yeah.
gonna touch in on that. I don't know even if it's helpful for like the actor itself, just because you're really say like you have 100 shots, right? You're gonna
Yeah,
try to pick the best one sounding to you, but that
yeah,
might not be what they're looking for. But in terms of like a live interview, you might have that five, and number four is what they were trying to get. So I
yeah,
get what you're saying in terms of it's just not it's a lot more less personable.
yeah. Well, I think you kind of in a way both ends of the party are being cheated.
Mhm.
They're cheated in a way for that opportunity to actually express themselves. And you know, remember, a director's going to get in close with if because they're going to get want to get a feel for it, and they're going to be picking up nuances that you, like you said, that you might have discarded in the tape that you send in.
Yeah.
So it's a hit and miss. Yeah. So I went along to 20th Century Fox, who were then financing Star Wars. They um they have an office in London in Soho Square. And Soho is an area where you have all of the film production companies, the agencies, the legal side of it, the accounting. It's basically a hub in
Yeah.
central London, very much in central London, just off Piccadilly Circus, where the entertainment business kind of thrives. And also in that area are all the theaters. It's kind of like it's the West End theater scene. It's back-to-back live performances in theaters and things like that. It
Yeah.
also, many years ago, I mean, they've kind of cleaned it up. It also used to be the home of a thriving sex industry,
Gotcha.
which
Just in
gave,
terms of shooting videos?
well, no, this was live entertainment, strip clubs, things like that.
Yeah.
It actually kind of, I think when they took it all away, Soho lost a little bit of its
Re-
edge. And
yeah, a little revenue maybe.
yeah, but it also kind of lost its kind of, dark side appeal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. And so it was natural you had, the film community and television community and all that was right in the next to theaters where it was all happening, where it was all going on. Yeah. So yeah, so so I went to meet George Lucas. I didn't know. I mean, it wasn't until I got there that I realized or I understood who I was meeting with, really. Um, I had an advantage because I had prior in those days you have there used to be a 6 months delay in films coming from the United States to be shown in the UK because a film would be screened in the United States to become successful, and then it was maybe sometimes as long as 6 months before it'd start to show up in the UK. So I had fortunately seen American Graffiti,
Okay.
so I actually had an understanding, recognizing that George Lucas actually knew how to make a film.
Yeah.
That I hadn't seen THX 1138, but I'd seen American Graffiti. So basically, George was sitting in an empty room with nothing on the walls and just a desk, and it was kind of it was a chat, really. It was a chat, and he kind of let me glance at the script and things like that, but we didn't do any heavy readings. I might have done, if I can't remember, I might have read a scene with him or read through a scene with him, but it was not a big stand-up audition type of thing. It was kind of personal.
Yeah.
And then it was weeks later that my agent contacted me and said they'd like you to play Fixer, which is the character in the deleted scenes along with Cammy's character, who is
Yeah.
Q. And so those scenes, and actually it's part of Big's performance as well, those scenes didn't make the final cut. Um, and they were filmed in Tunisia. So we were filming the first days of filming, the very first week of filming, we were filming those scenes before anything else was filmed. We'd gone from the UK, flown out to Tunisia, and they had already set up stuff on location in that. And it was while we were there and prior to me actually seeing it filming any of the fixer scene, because we were doing outdoor exterior scenes in Tunisia, and then we are going back to do the interiors in the UK at Elstree Studios. And so
This is still for the
whenever,
fixture role at this time, right?
yeah, this was just for the fixer role.
Yeah.
but it was at that time when I was at the hotel, that Robert Watts, who sadly just passed away.
I rest in peace to Robert Watts. He was a great Star Wars ad. I mean, he
Yeah, he
produced a
was.
lot.
Yeah, he was very much a kind of stable within the Star Wars and also Indiana Jones within Lucasfilm.
Yeah.
And so what happened was he'd come to the hotel and he was looking for me and he found me and he said, the director would like to see you on the set. And I know I wasn't scheduled to do anything that day. So I said, okay. So we got in the car and he drove me out to the location and we're at the location. And then I've told this story a few times now. Um, as we're pulling up, George Lucas is walking towards the car with a script in his hand. And as I get out of the car, and George takes me aside, and he said, basically, can you take a look at this, and can you play this scene for me? And so we had a chat. Um, I said I agreed to it, and then next thing, as we're walking, George has gone ahead, I guess, to do something with the camera crew or something. And as I'm walking behind him, they're starting to dress me. I'm trying to look at the script to see the scene and get a handle on what the scene is that he did say, you don't have to worry, you're going to be in costume, right?
This is the move along scene at this time,
This is
right?
yeah.
Okay.
As they're dressing me as I'm walking.
Yeah.
They are in a hurry to get this thing done because obviously there was a delay of some sort. Nobody ever explained to me what the delay was, but I had a feeling that afterwards that it was maybe that Alec Guinness or Sir Alec Guinness
Hmm.
uh, for Obi-Wan, he wanted an actor to play off him. Often you will have scenes, situations where the script continuity person will will read the lines. Um, and you have to remember there were any of the other any of the other people who were dressed in the costumes in the scene with us, none of them really spoke English. They
Oh,
were
interesting.
they were all local Tunisians who had been hired as who had been hired as extras
In
to work
terms of
on.
the other troopers behind you.
Yeah, the other troopers. Yeah,
Yeah.
there are shots of them, but I don't believe any of them spoke English in that respect. And there were
Interesting.
some people around who were English, but I guess George knew that my accent was not a very English accent.
Hmm.
So it helped to actually have it for him when he wanted to do the re-recording or anything like that. And so, you know, that was how it kind of started. And I turned the corner and they were all set up, ready to go. And so I was introduced to Alec Guinness. I'd met Mark Hamill at the bar the night before. And so we had a kind of initial introduction and then we started going through the scene. We did a rehearsal or two and then filming started.
Gotcha. So I like so many questions. Like we're just are able to branch off of all of that. I guess
Yeah.
this just to start, just to get it out of the air. Two things. Number one, was it bittersweet when the Fixer returned in the Book of Boba Fett, episode two? I mean, like that character that you were supposed to play,
Yeah,
then it
yeah,
kind of got, cut
yeah,
obviously for a reason that isn't really kind of unknown. It's just George Lucas the way that he's thinking. I mean, no one can think like George Lucas. That's why we have a whole galaxy of just different
yeah,
creatures and ships that are just un
yeah.
the creative is just insane on that. Um, so like was it kind of just bittersweet, like seeing the fixture actually in action or
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't until the deleted scenes started appearing
Mhm.
that there was an awareness of really of the fixer and
Yeah,
that, and those scenes. And because it's Star Wars and the fandom there's a huge interest in every minutia of Star Wars. So
everything. Yep.
it wasn't really till then. And to be honest, I hadn't really followed Star Wars very much. I'd kind of gotten on with a different world. I'd gone into, in the 1980s, I became very heavily recording albums for RCA Records as a producer.
Oh,
And
okay.
I spent nearly 4 years just working in recording studios around London and that. And so there's a lot of stuff that I was doing that was just not in the direction that I would be aware of what was going on in the Star Wars world or Star Wars community.
Hmm.
the next thing, it wasn't until 2007 that I attended my first Star Wars convention.
Gotcha. So you were kind of, I don't want to say casted out, but you weren't really a part of that current fandom and con circuit and all that. Like
No,
how did you get back into cons? Was it a
I was
uh
in, we were living in Los Angeles, and the producer I was working with, I'd happened to notice there was a billboard up downtown Los Angeles because I was at those times I was directing reels for actors, scenes for actors, directing them in their scenes so that, and we were shooting them, and then when they were putting them on their reels for their agents and things like that. And I discovered there was a Star Wars convention going on. I said to the producer I was working with, I said, "Hey, there's a Star Wars convention going on," and she said, "Well, I'm going to call them," and she called them and she got me an invite, and that was the first time that I'd actually attend. That was 2007. She contacted Official Pics, and it kind of started happening from there. They had to clear it with Lucasfilm to say, is this actually the guy that played these scenes? Is this
yeah.
actually, it's because, but there's quite a number of photographs which have come out, which are behind the scenes, where we're rehearsing the scene where I don't have the helmet on, so it's different angles and stuff like that. So you can actually see the fact that yes, it's me that's playing the scene in the Jedi mind trick. I'm the one that's getting mind tricked.
I was gonna say the first ever mind trick, I believe, right? Isn't
I
that the
think it was very, yeah, it was, and it was very important, I think, to Alec Guinness as an actor to get the scene right, because I think he
yeah.
understood this is a very important moment from the story's point of view and from his character's point of view to demonstrate the power that he has.
Yep. Because Mark at that point, Luke is kind of questioning who
Yeah,
really is this guy? Like, is he
yeah,
going to develop me at all, or
yeah,
is he
yeah,
kind of just some, some old guy on on a
yeah,
planet that's just trying to,
yeah,
use me for my power, overall power? So yeah,
yeah.
and especially now, I mean, the scene's only like 30 to 40 seconds long, but I think if you reference that scene to anyone that loves the original trilogy as much as I do,
Right,
I mean, it's such a pivotal scene because that's just kind of where you see the development and the understanding that Luke and Ben Kenobi at that time had. So
right,
I don't know. I just think it's a cool scene. And I think it's cool the magnitude that, in terms of Star Wars, scenes like that get recognition, and most of the times it's always, the fight scenes or the
yeah,
battle scenes.
yeah,
But in Star Wars, like the cantina scene,
yeah,
that's like one of the most pivotal. The
yeah,
mind trick scene, like it's just cool that
yeah,
little scenes like that us Star Wars fans appreciate more than, Luke and Vader, which is awesome. Don't get me wrong,
right.
but just that absolute story development. But yeah, that's just a little tangent I want to go on. It's just cool that
Yeah,
we appreciate that as much as we do.
it's great. I mean, I mean, it is quite amazing. I mean, Star Wars just generally is quite amazing, the fandom that surrounds it,
Yeah,
but also
absolutely.
the fact that you can take a moment in a film, often it's talked about there are what's called six magic moments in a movie.
Hmm.
And if you have those elements, then those are talking points that people take away with them to their friends, and they become the best marketing tools you can have. No matter how much money you spend on marketing, the best marketing you can have for a film is word of mouth.
Yeah.
It's the same with music. It's the same with any of the arts. It's, people talking about it because they're excited by it or they find something that really touches them in that. And so word of mouth is, and so the six magic moments should become word of mouth where, and I think in a way it's one of those unique scenes that has managed to capture a word of mouth with the audience to share it. And, the dialogue has become, so synonymous with Star Wars being used. I've had people come up to me and say, I've had a lawyer come up to me and say, I've used it in court. And, I've heard
Yeah.
politicians have used it. I mean, it's just been, these aren't the droids we're looking for and move along are just two lines that seem to resonate, right, and have done for a long time with the fans. And it's kind of gone on from there. And the scene has been mimicked so many times and
Yeah.
copied in different, different ways that there is that kind of unusual quality to it because I've done James Bond, I've done different films and things like that, and they don't carry the weight that a Star Wars scene does if it's a Star Wars scene that has really resonated with the audience.
Yeah.
It's I'm very fortunate for that and very grateful that it's the audience is kind of in its own way identified. And I guess I'm playing a cop, so
Yeah, right.
it's like a lot of people have come up against where they've been stopped by cops on the road. So you know,
You didn't see me speed.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
S- So just
So
more of a silly question. This is more for a personal way. I mean, you're in Tunisia. When
yeah,
you I mean that suit, it's not just a paper suit. You know what I mean? It's a lug of
plastic,
plastic or materials, right? How
PVC.
hot
Yeah,
is it in the desert filming
it
that
was.
kind of scene?
I think it was about 82 degrees.
Okay. Is
This
that
was
Fahrenheit or Celsius?
that's Fahrenheit.
Okay.
Yeah. If it was Celsius, we'd all be dead.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was like,
Yeah.
I always forget the conversion, but I was like,
Yeah.
that'd be insane.
Yeah. Yeah, it was 82 Fahrenheit, and it was, as you can see, there's a picture of me under being with an umbrella held over me, and not Alec Guinness or Mark,
Yeah.
and I was drinking, being given water
Yeah.
because it's hot, it's warm, yeah,
And
and
I'm sure
and
that suit feels, 120 when you're actually
well,
in
also
that
because
suit.
yeah, these were not made to measure. These were the first suits that ever came off the production line for the
Yeah.
film. They were not made to measure. I think there was maybe half a dozen suits or something like that. And so they were very scratchy on the inside, very uncomfortable, pinching every time you move the elbows or you bent your knee. Hard to walk in. When they first put the backpack on, I was standing in sand and I almost fell over
Oh,
because
really? Is it that
yeah,
heavy?
yeah, well, I think they'd weighted it. The props department will do that. For instance, if you
Yeah.
give luggage to an actor, it's not a good idea to give them empty luggage because it looks like they're carrying empty luggage.
Yeah.
If you put something in it, it looks like they're actually carrying real luggage. It's just one of those things that you need to, the props department would be very aware of. And so I think they weighted it a bit. Yeah, yeah. So.
That's a cool little tidbit. I never like when you watch that scene, I guess a lot of people don't realize what all goes into that kind of scene. I mean, that scene, how many people are kind of on set filming that? Is it about 20 people probably, you would
I
say?
should think there's around that many people. Yeah,
And
quite a lot of activity from the props department,
yeah,
and that. Also there's because there were a number one of the problems I had with the suit is they had to duct tape the back of it because the legs parts were falling off,
oh,
or the
really?
yeah. So these were, as I said, these were the most primitive of these were the first runs of
Yeah,
this. So they're pretty primitive. And so when you're making a movie, you're not thinking about at the time that it's going to go to 4K and 6K and everybody's going to be able to see the tape.
yeah,
They're, all the little things you're hiding in with a film
yeah.
are all of a sudden now you can magnify it. Everybody at home can magnify it on their computers and they can see the greatest details. Yeah.
Do you know if the tape was ever shown? I never realized anything.
So
There's no back shots either, so I think you're more
yeah,
safe from that, right?
yeah, I think there's a couple of stills or something like that that people have managed to grab or screen grabs that people have done that they've kind of managed to see. Oh yeah, we can see the tape or we can see they find all these little details that because
Yeah.
you have through the great work of Albin Johnson is the 501st Legion, which demands screen accuracy.
Hmm.
And I remember when I first met Albin, he was very kindly said that I was the reason he started costuming, that he wanted to dress up like the Sand Trooper.
Yeah,
He wanted
that's
to have
pretty
a
cool.
yeah, and so he said that's kind of like the foundation of the 501st was, came about through his desire to um, have do cosplay in a Sand Trooper costume. Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
So who left? Like, who are you still? I know you're friends with Brian Muir, right? Who else are
Yeah.
you kind of friends with in the Star Wars world? Is it more people that you see at conventions, or is there anyone that you text daily?
No, there's not really anyone I text daily. We're a number of us, John Morton, Garrick Hagan.
Hmm.
There's there's a number of us that have worked on several productions together, not
Post
just
Star Wars, yeah,
not just Star Wars. I mean, Garrick and I worked on we both worked on Oppenheimer, the TV series, and we both worked on the James Bond film, Spy Who Loved Me. And
yeah.
John Morton worked on Oppenheimer. I mean, there was a group of actors at that time in London who all came from North America, who were being cast in anything that was to do requiring a North American accent or actors who could feasibly be playing Americans and that. I mean, I did a whole summer play as a character called Sergeant Haley in the film called The Eagle Has Landed.
Hmm.
I was fortunate enough to Sergeant Haley was the sidekick of Larry Hagman. So Larry Hagman played the colonel. I guess it's a colonel he's
Yeah.
playing. And my character, I spent days with him in a Jeep driving around. And so I got to hear all his great stories about Hollywood and things like that and his adventures. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate all your stories that you're able to tell us. I really
Yeah.
do. Do you want to kind of talk about? I know we talked a little bit earlier about how you have a son that's kind of into producing. Do you want to kind of plug what he's kind of working on and stuff and
Well,
give a little
he's
tidbit?
actually a director. He's just
Oh,
directed.
director, sorry. My
Yeah, yeah,
apologies.
no, he's a director, and I mean, these days, if you're an independent, you kind of have to do every piece. You have to be prepared to do all the bits and pieces of it.
Yeah.
You're prepared to do writing when it's necessary, directing and that. And he actually performs as well. So there's only the one film he hasn't performed in is a film called Durango, which is a story that is going to be in Los Angeles November the 8th. I think it's screening in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And that is because the American film market's coming up. And so that's a story that is really centered around a friend of his who invited him to come and do a documentary kind of drama shoot with him as he goes back to Africa to revisit his family after many, many years and try to well, rekindle with his, rejoin his family roots that he had left behind and also to kind of put peace to his relationship with his father. So it's a very interesting. It's basically it's a true story, but it's done in a very docudrama fashion. And Samuel Forrest, who's my son,
Hmm.
he's 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 a very independent filmmaker. He just finished a film in Los Angeles called Godhead, which he's now editing and re-editing and trying to finesse. But
Yeah.
he's prepared to take on the tough life of an independent filmmaker, working out sometimes inside and mostly outside the system. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's his primary career.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Gotcha.
And then there's, I've I've still got a film that sits around that I will eventually call the Battle of Bob, not the battle, it's the Ballad of Bob's Garage, which I shot many, many years ago. But there's some really interesting performances in it. I wrote it and I was directing it, but the actors they really came up with a really strong performances, and it's actually the first film that an actor did who now is well known for being in Homeland and he's in the Blacklist. Is an actor called Diego Klattenhoff.
Okay.
And Diego plays the young hero in it. And it's a story, the Ballad of Bob's Garage is a story of what happens to these five guys who are friends. And although Diego's character is younger and he's kind of like his sister is married to the guy, Bob, whose garage it is. And so he does what happens to them one night in this garage when everything goes wrong and there's too many drugs, there's too much drinking,
Hmm.
and there's a gun. And we were talking about medicine before, and it's kind of interesting because one of the characters gets shot and everything goes into a panic because everybody's, although Willie's character, who is Diego, has not been doing any drugs,
Hmm.
but they've all been doing way too much cocaine. And when one of them gets shot, everything goes into a whole different world. And it's actually made, the decision is made. They can't call the cops because it's Bob is a cop who owns the garage.
Oh, geez.
They don't want to call the cops. And so
Yeah,
they decide to operate on their friend in the garage, using the tools in the garage
to retrieve the bullet.
to retrieve the bullet and save his life.
That sounds interesting. We'll
And
definitely. No, you
yeah,
go. I apologize.
no, no, go ahead. You're going to ask a
No, I
question.
was just gonna say, like, we will definitely in the link below, guys,
Yeah,
on YouTube and Instagram and stuff, we'll link all of the information that Mr. Forrest did just say to us about his son, and if he has anything to show forth for his current film as well, that'll all be in there. So make sure to check that out.
thanks. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Well,
it's so we were talking a bit before about medicine
yeah.
and working in the trauma. Well, I actually had to get, I got a director in who's a professor who, not a director, a doctor in who's a professor who teaches in Toronto, because the story takes place in Toronto in Canada, who teaches, trauma and ER and that. And so I had to go through all of the tools in the garage to make sure that these could possibly used in this operation.
Oh, nice.
So,
The little
so
fact check.
yeah, I actually had to. So he came in, and so I was going through the script with him to make sure that I could use these kind of pliers, that I could use this kind of, I use a just a Stanley knife, right?
Yeah.
As a, and we actually, in the story, I'm using to resuscitate him. I'm using battery jumper cables.
Oh, Jesus.
So it's kind of there's kind of this nice raw element to it where you realize how crazy they've all gone,
Hmm.
but at the same time how they're Willie, who is not out of it and not stoned on drugs and that, is managing to pull it together. Yeah. And
Well,
his story, his backstory is the fact that they laugh at him because he works in the pathology department. He works in the morgue,
mhm.
moving the corpses around and things like that. So he knows a few things, and he's much smarter than anybody can realizes actually how bright he is. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you for doing this with me.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it went pretty well for the first ever one. Uh,
Yeah.
looks like we only got about 2 minutes left. So if you got any final remarks or anything to the viewers you just wanted to
No,
say,
I just want to thank all the Star Wars fans, those who come out and say hello and stuff like that. It's because it's one thing to be in Star Wars, but for me it's really interesting because I like meeting the fans because I like to hear their stories.
yeah,
And I like to hear that, and many of the fans tell me how they first, came to discover Star Wars, whether they were taken by their grandfather or, they went, with their dad or something like that, or their mom. It was the first film that they went to see in the cinema and stuff like that. So for many, there's a lot of memories that Star Wars holds. A lot of childhood memories.
yeah,
So I like to, it's nice to hear that. Yeah.
absolutely. Well, thank you, Mr. Farce. I appreciate you very much. And
Okay.
all of us Star Wars fans do.
Yeah. My pleasure to be on the show and to be the first up.
Absolutely.
Good luck with everything.
Thanks for
All the
taking on
best.
that task.
Okay. My pleasure. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, thank you guys. It's Martini's Cantina here. Uh, like and subscribe. Everything will be linked in the bio. It's going to be Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram. We'll showcase all of that. Um, again, thank you so much for all of this. I know it's been a long time in the coming. I appreciate everyone kind of checking in and seeing where I'm at with it. And many episodes, a lot of people that were reaching out to kind of make these things happen. So have a great day and have a drink on the galaxy.